All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being with us tonight. We are very excited to have our October EcoNet call with you tonight. Unfortunately, one of our the speakers that we had tonight, Karen Coulter, had to drop out at the last minute, but we still have plenty of stuff to talk about with y'all, with two big hurricanes coming and bringing a bunch of destruction, devastation, but also a lot of attention around environmental issues. I think as these storms kind of get inevitably worse, this space is going to become increasingly more powerful. So thank you all for being here. As people kind of start to file in a little bit, I just want for those of us that are here, maybe have a little icebreaker, put your name and where you're from in the chat. And if you have any notable storm stories, I know my mother always talks about Hurricane Dora blew through St. Simon's when she was a kid and ripped the roof of their house off. So that's my storm story. But my name is Cole Bennett. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. And like I said, we are happy to have you. Because Karen's not with us today, we are going to try and be a little bit more interactive. I want to hear from some of y'all about things that might be going on in your area or actions that we can uplift. And I do want to mention that Karen, I think Greg put it in the chat, but Karen will be with us next month with the Blue Mountain Biodiversity Project, and she'll be telling us all about that. So not too much different than a normal EcoNet call. You're just going to be hearing from me a little bit more than you might have. So all right. If we want to go ahead before I get into anything, does anybody want to share anything going on in your neck of the woods? Todd, Barbara, anything going on? This is also going to be kind of more freeform than normal. We're going to be kind of more informal than we normally are. So if you have any thoughts, please, please feel free to share them. Yes, go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, I'll tell you that perhaps you've heard there's an election coming up, and that has been taking up all of my time. You just figure that you can't do enough, and you never know what it's going to take to make a difference. So anyway, that's been consuming all my time. But I will tell you, and I put in the chat tonight, I had a real happy surprise. My daughter called me and said, go outside and look to the north, and we can see the aurora here around Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. It's just a pink glow in the northern half of the sky, but I've never seen the aurora before, so I thought it was pretty remarkable.
That's awesome. That's definitely on the bucket list for me. I've never seen it as well. I just had a friend that did this crazy hike so that he could see it, and the pictures were crazy. I was so jealous. But
normally not around here. It's a big solar storm of the past week, and I'm sure that's what's driving it. So it's pretty unusual.
But yeah, I also wanted to echo what you said. There's lots of stuff going on around the election. It seems like everybody's kind of frantic, already frantic. And then, of course, with the storms we've been having, it just kind of makes everything kind of hectic around this time of year for people in this space. So welcome those that are joining. Our speaker for this evening, Karen Coulter, cannot be with us, but we want to hear from any of y'all about what you've got going on and ways that we can connect in this and use this space as a place to not only talk about these things and link environmental issues to corporate rule and corporate personhood, corporate power, but also uplift things that we can do in our neighborhood. I'm going to talk to y'all in a second about what's been going on here in Atlanta and the kind of actions that have arisen out of a big explosion we just had at a chemical plant. But I'm going to go ahead and just kind of get into it. Let me post the agenda here in the chat. Also, if I forget anything, please let me know. But so I posted the agenda for this call here in the chat. Normally, this is when we would have Karen kind of, take a minute to talk about the work that they're doing. We will have that next month, but in the absence of Karen, we were planning on having me do a little bit of a community spotlight just about the storm response to both Hurricane Helene and now Milton here in Georgia, and an accompanying, as I previously mentioned, chemical explosion that happened right outside Atlanta. So Atlanta's had a lot of stuff going on in the past week or so. So I'm just, instead of doing a small community spotlight on that, where I'm going to be talking more about that and just kind of how, yes, this has to do with the community of Atlanta and the Southeast, but the unfortunate fact is that things that have to do with climate, things that have to do with local governments being corrupt in the face of a drastically worsening climate situation. That those kind of things, unfortunately, are going to kind of be commonplace and have become commonplace in our society. And so, as I'm talking about Atlanta and talking about the stuff that's going on here, I'm sure there is. It's an unfortunate fact. I'm sure that there's probably people in your government where you live or companies that are nearby you as well that are creating or worsening these disasters, ecological disasters that are happening, in every town USA. So I'm just going to kind of get into it. The link to a blog post that I wrote last week, right after all this stuff happened, is here in chat. And then I'll also be talking about some efforts that have been made to bring action, legislation, and community action against the company that was responsible for this explosion. So I'm just going to go ahead and get into it. So not this past Thursday, but the Thursday before that, September 26th, everyone in Atlanta got a government alert on their phone that Helene, the path that it was going to take, was going to go up through the Georgia Panhandle, or through the Florida Panhandle, and go completely up through Georgia. Atlanta was supposed to be really hard hit by the hurricane. It ended up not. It ended up veering eastward and going up the coast, as we all know, bringing destruction, devastation, unprecedented levels of flooding to places like Asheville, North Carolina, and other eastern Tennessee, these kind of mountain towns that are not the first place that you would think of when you think about places that are affected by climate change. Usually you think of coastal places where the water level rises, but I think the most shocking thing that came out of the aftermath of Hurricane Helene to a lot of people, myself included, was just kind of the ways that our infrastructure is not prepared for the kind of flooding that we're likely to see with these storms that are getting increasingly worse. of course, as a result of climate change and the fossil fuel industry warming our climate. It's ironic in the past couple of days that kind of a right-wing talking point, a conspiracy theory really, about there being some weather machine and Democrats and the powers that be are controlling the hurricanes and stuff. And the reality is a lot. I don't know if it's less fantastical, but much more predictable, which is that capitalism and corporate capitalism, corporate rule is what's affecting the weather and creating these worsening conditions for storms. But anyways, as I was saying, again, I'll also apologize if I get off track. I got a lot to say and not too much time to say it. So apologies in advance if I get off track. What was crazy about the flooding in North Carolina is how kind of shocking this was to see these high elevation places get this level of flooding, and that the infrastructure not being able equipped to handle that. All the highways going into Asheville were completely destroyed in the floods, and you had these horror stories coming out of places like North Carolina where people are stranded for days without power, without electricity. Here in Georgia, Augusta, Georgia was hit really bad, and people have been without. People just now, like a week, more than a week after the hurricane made landfall, are just now getting power back. They're just kind of getting access to all this stuff. Pretty absent a lot of this has been the federal response. Again, it's been another. Trump talked about how bad Biden's FEMA response was. That has been fact checked to hell. Sorry, pardon my French, but and a bunch of people are saying no. The Biden administration did a good job. The reality is FEMA, right before Hurricane Helene hit, announced that it had a $9 billion shortfall of the funds that it needed to adequately deal with the aftermath of Helene, or another hurricane such as Hurricane Milton, that's bound to come behind it. That same day, September 26th, the same day that the Helene made landfall in Florida, the same day that FEMA announced the shortfall of funds, the Biden administration sent an $8.7 billion weapons package to the state of Israel. The theme here, and as I talk about what the chemical explosion in Atlanta, the theme here is that our government would rather prioritize the people who are causing the climate disaster, the climate crisis, rather than those that are actually affected by it. People like you and me.
Cool.
Senate House Republicans, Mike Johnson. Yeah, go ahead, Todd.
I may not disagree with your conclusion there, but you mentioned FEMA's comment about not having enough money, and there was a big article today about that being an incorrect report that Fox News blew way out of proportion. And the FEMA head was talking about funding following the continuing resolution, and he was basically talking off the cuff, saying that we really, there isn't enough money to do all of the things. And he came back later and clarified it and said, we have the funding now, but this is already the beginning of the year. The funding we have is not going to carry us through. The continuing resolution is a short-term solution, not a long-term solution. Fox News very quietly made corrections to some of their statements, but they didn't really go and publish it very well. So a lot of that is another meme started with Fox that started attacking FEMA and the Biden administration because of the way that the administrator said it, even though he corrected it afterwards. So don't conflate those things necessarily. Okay,
Right.
just take that piece out, and then I think your points still have merit on their own, but the
Well,
hyperbole is everywhere.
right, right. Well, yeah, and I do. Please fact check me because uh, it's definitely prudent to do so. But
Washington
to
Post
your
today
point,
is where
to
I
your
read
point,
that.
you're right. To your point, these are the same people that are complaining about FEMA's funding are the same, House Republican Mike Johnson. They just vetoed a bill that would allot more funding to FEMA. And I'm not super up to date with where it currently stands, but the gist of what I'm trying to say is that whether it's House Republicans, uh, whoever the current administration, whoever, they kind of are more concerned with their day to day with the dealings of our kind of political ruling class than they are with actual people that are suffering from the Americans that are suffering in these places. The House Republicans vetoing that bill undoubtedly is so that they could push that narrative of FEMA was not given enough funding because the Biden administration is too busy spending money on X, Y, and Z. The point here is that our government, neither our infrastructure nor our government is prepared to take this or willing to take this, is prepared for this coming climate crisis and is willing to take the necessary steps to actually enacting meaningful climate change, not announce the current administration and administrations past love talking about, crude oil production is up and all this stuff, where what you're seeing, we're going to continue to see these kinds of storms and this kind of arguably unprepared response, as long as these things continue within our government. So while people in Atlanta, people across the Southeast have been dealing with the after effects of Hurricane Helene, including a bunch of flooding in the city of Atlanta. As I said before, the city of Atlanta was mostly spared by the storm. Places like Augusta, further north, Tennessee and North Carolina got the after effects of Helene much worse. But there was a lot of flooding in Atlanta. And Atlanta has had flooding problems a lot lately because there's been a lot of development in Atlanta and specifically a lot of deforestation, particularly around the controversial Atlanta Police Training Facility, which we've done a lot of work on. I've done a lot of work with the movement against the construction of the police facility. But the unfortunate news is that Cop City is, the Atlanta Police Training Facility, also known as Cop City. Cop City is unfortunately being built, and big portions of the Weelaunee Forest in Southwest Atlanta are being uprooted, and in doing so, the people building Cop City are also allowing these places to these kind of floodplains to overflow and flood as the natural protectors against that, the trees that were previously there, have been uprooted. Let me take a breath here. So what you have is in the city of Atlanta. Not only were we kind of unprepared, or places like North Carolina, Tennessee that were unprepared for the hurricane, in Atlanta, we have flooding. We have all kinds of aging water infrastructure. We keep having our water mains break in Atlanta, and people have to go on boil water advisories. People have to, there's a bunch of problems that are caused by this infrastructure breaking, and the city of Atlanta and the mayor's office, Mayor Andre Dickens, has been criticized a lot, not just from kind of the activist space, but from a lot of people in the Atlanta area that are kind of scratching their heads at, why are our water mains breaking? Why are our very, why hasn't our water system been updated when we are, taxpayer money, we are funneling 60 million, $60 million into of taxpayer money funneling into the Cop City project. The mayor's office has been criticized, and the Atlanta City Council has been criticized for misallocating funds to projects like the Atlanta Police Training Facility that we more or less, as the people of Atlanta, don't feel like we need. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting off track. So you have flooding in Atlanta from the hurricane, flooding that's exacerbated by these kind of small developments in town Atlanta, and then very much exacerbated by the very large Cop City project that has all kinds of ecological disasters associated with it, ecological degradation. They've been the flooding that's occurred has been, was warned. They were warned by the Sierra Club, by other groups, that flooding in the area would happen if they took up all these trees. They ignored it. They have kind of shoehorned this Cop City development. They've kind of thrust it onto the Atlanta people, no matter what, despite the kind of democratic efforts there have been to stop it. So all this is going on. People are under, we have water mains break all the time. We have the day that this explosion occurred, which the Hurricane Helene was set to hit on Thursday, September 26th. On Sunday, September 29th, people that were on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, started seeing and just in the area, started seeing a huge, large red cloud over in the Conyers suburb of Atlanta, which is just a little bit. It's due east of Atlanta, but it's people from Conyers say that they're from Atlanta. It's very close to Atlanta. There was a giant explosion that occurred at a chemical processing plant owned by this company called Biolab. And what Biolab does is they manufacture chemical, like pool chemicals, chlorine, pool cleaning chemicals. And there was a huge explosion. There was a big fire on that Sunday. People saw it on their phones. People saw it. There was a haze over the city. They could just kind of smell a general smell of chlorine in the city. It wasn't until hours and hours later that this had been reported on social media and on, just kind of word of mouth, that the Atlanta government issued a statement about the chlorine explosion. They said an alert went out to people that said that it had 17,000 people in the Conyers area evacuate from the immediate area around the facility. And then there was a separate shelter-in-place warning for another 90,000 people. And I can tell you right now, everybody in Atlanta got the shelter-in-place warning. The chlorine gas that got out started causing problems, respiratory problems with people, and people were getting sick. There's all kinds of kind of fear around it. What come to find out, the chemical plant that it occurred at, Biolab, this is their third chemical fire in the Conyers area in the last 20 years. And so the chemical explosion that occurred, people have it bad enough. People in Atlanta have it bad enough with the kind of aftermath of the flooding and the hurricane. The natural disasters that are being made worse by climate change. Now we're dealing with a very much man-made and as preventable as the flooding in North Carolina and in Atlanta and across the Southeast. This kind of lack of preparedness, as preventable as that was, this chlorine explosion that occurred here in Conyers was completely preventable. This company, Biolab, they're owned by a private equity company, Centerbridge Partners. Centerbridge Partners, there's all kinds of jargonistic financial dealings that have to do with private equity that occurred, but the gist of it is that they had recently bought and kind of gutted Biolab to the tune of $850 million. As I said earlier, this happened here in Conyers, but this could happen really anywhere, because the fact of the matter is these private equity companies and a lot of things are safety is not the priority in companies like this. They're really the private equities companies that come in, it's really all about money, and they cut corners. They cut corners, and then once those corners are cut, once something happens, they're able to then kind of pass off their losses to the community. And again, this is kind of a general theme here, both in Econet and just in Move to Amend, of privatizing profits and publicizing losses. And so Biolab has had this is their third large explosion that has caused a shelter-in-place alert. They have had previous incidents in other places, such as Louisiana. They have a horrible history of negligence and things causing damage like this explosion did. Despite that, the city of Conyers in 2019, knowing all of their history, knowing everything that's occurred, the Rockdale County Economic Development Authority granted Biolab an undisclosed amount in tax incentives for an expansion of the very facility that just exploded in 2019. So it's kind of this is the kind of thing that happens, unfortunately, all too frequently and in all of our communities. A company acts in bad faith. They purposely cut corners, and we are all here to kind of deal with the consequences of that. The consequences have actually been a lot. They've gotten the story here has gotten a lot kind of crazier in the past couple of days. So the city of Conyers, local leaders have come together, and there's now a big movement and I put a link here in the agenda. There's now a petition to shut down Biolab, and there's also a website that this has kind of turned into a movement. I was on a call this past Monday, just an information call about kind of what to expect moving forward. It has kind of ignited something in the community of really re-examining the role that these kind of companies play in our society. And so there's talk of bad faith legislation, making sure that companies like Biolab that have this, horrible history are not able to set up shop in places, in places like Conyers or hopefully anywhere. We've at Move So Men have done a lot of stuff with corporate 3 strikes laws, somehow holding corporations accountable for the harm that they cause. The silver lining in all of this Biolab stuff is that there has been a revitalized or some form of concerted effort to really talk about this and talk about corporate power and talk about the harm that corporations do. Because again, that tax credit that was offered to them by the city of Conyers, I'm sure when that was decided on, there was all kinds of language about, these are, just going to bring jobs and this is what makes this community great. And the reality is they're just harming us and they're robbing our communities. Companies like Biolab, private equity companies like Centerbridge Partners. So this story has actually gotten crazier since I wrote this blog post. There was a state hearing on Biolab and what's to be done about the chlorine explosion and everything that's happened. At that hearing, the Rockdale County Soil and Water Conservation Representative, Kenny Johnson, testified. And he testified to Biolab's negligence. He actually, right after he gave that, and this is rather sad, honestly, right after he gave that, right after he testified, he collapsed with respiratory problems, and he later passed away here at Grady Hospital. So it just kind of adds this, there's a lot of fear that's been going on around the city of Atlanta and the people of Conyers. And, there's been kind of a questioning of, well, how bad is this chlorine really? The smell is dissipated and the haze, the fog that was over the entire city of Atlanta has dissipated. This can kind of blow over. And the reality is that the chlorine gas and the levels that the levels that we were ingesting it, everyone in the city of Atlanta was ingesting it. We've had all kinds of experts come in and say this and say that, but the reality is we have not gotten a real clear, definitive course of action from the city of Atlanta or an honest reckoning with what this explosion really means and means for our health and our safety. The alert that went out on our phones, again, several, basically an entire afternoon after this had, people already knew about this and had, kind of reached out to their own networks to ensure their safety from it. The alert that went out, it says, it might be fine, it might not be fine. The language kind of was very similar to a lot of the stuff we got around COVID of like, use your best judgment. If you have respiratory issues, this might, this might affect you. If you have pre-existing conditions, you might want to take extra precaution and be, stay indoors even more than you would have already done so. But the point in highlighting is to kind of point out that when it comes down to really protecting the people, our governments, our corporations, the people that we have allowed to amass the power that they have, are really not looking out for our safety, our best interests, and really the only thing that really moves these forces is the kind of price point on it, the money is really the only thing that kind of causes these forces to take climate safety, public health seriously. And I think that's very unfortunate. And all of these things kind of seem like isolated incidents. The response to Helene, the biolab incident, the flooding around Atlanta that's happening because of Cop City being built. It all kind of, in a vacuum, kind of seems unrelated and like three separate incidents. But really, once you start drawing the link to the fact that corporations really kind of rule our government and are the ones that are dictating the responses to these problems, the preparedness for these disasters that, again, are going to keep getting worse, they really don't have our best interests in mind. And so we either need to create these systems for ourselves, which oftentimes you have to do in our society, or we need to start getting really serious with our elected officials about what we're going to do to make sure that we're more prepared for the very real threat of climate change that is moving forward. So I'm going to stop talking. I don't know if I took a single breath through all that, and I'm sorry if some of it seems discombobulated or all over the place, but I want to open it up at this point to kind of share some thoughts, share anything. Like I said, I think this is the kind of thing that the biolab explosion, it's unfortunately something that happens everywhere. And these local governments that give them the tax breaks and the ability to do so, those exist everywhere. And there's always something that can be done in our communities and stuff to fight back against corporate power. Anyways, I'm gonna stop talking and open it up. If anybody wants to share any thoughts about the stuff in Atlanta or just
I'll comment.
anything. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
And you've described certainly a significant case study in environmental insult and what was behind it. Clearly, government is involved. So you got to, if the politicians don't respond, replace them. And I realize that's easier said than done. But one of the reasons, or the reason why I've been coming into these meetings, or I guess over the last year or so periodically, is because one of the frustrations is always that there are all these different individual cases, whether it's something on the local river, something that some company is releasing into the air that they shouldn't be, or an explosion like you had here. All of those things happen, and so what's the unifying theme or problem? That's what I was always struggling with. Each of these individual events galvanizes a community around it, but it's local, and it doesn't fix the problem. It may go solve this problem here locally, but that's not the root cause. And the only thing that I've ever even had a suggestion of that might deal with it is exactly what Move to Amend is trying to do, which is consequences and responsibility for corporations, and that they have too much power, and the power allows them to accumulate too much money. But so I don't know what to do about that. I think Move to Amend has a great solution if we can get that to move ahead, and it affects so much in the environmental movement, all of the local eaches are covered by this umbrella. That's the way it strikes me. So that's why I come to these meetings. Even if I don't have something that I've been doing environmental wise to talk about, I want to hear and I want to show my support because I don't know any other organization or group that is trying to do anything that will really have a broad impact. You know, I can go talk and work on the locals, and I'll do that around where I live. But in a year, that problem may be gone, or the company is bankrupt. I mean, there's another problem, right? I mean, the companies just disappear. So anyway, that's why I'm on these calls. That's why I think the purpose of Move to Amend is the right way to pick to try to solve it on a big scale. End of soapbox.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly appreciate you being here, Todd. I feel like I've said this phrase a lot in the past 2 weeks or so, but we've been talking a lot lately about how there's so much going on in each of our communities. There's so many problems that are kind of related to corporate power that each kind of deserve their own attention. We've been using the terminology lately that these are all fires that need to be put out. At Move to Amend, yes, we want to put out the fires, but really we want to go after the people that are lighting things on fire and starting fires.
The arsonist.
Arsonists is the word that we've been using, and it's true. What's some semblance of silver lining in all of this is that people are really starting to kind of look up and say, wow, Hurricane Milton in Florida, there were like 100 tornadoes that were recorded while this was going on, and it's like, that seems worse than how I used to remember. And I'm a young guy. I haven't been around as long as some of my colleagues to kind of see how things have gotten worse. But just in my lifetime, I feel like storms have been getting worse. Governments have been less prepared, and I think the boogeyman in all of it, it's not hard to see. Corporations control almost every aspect of our life, and since 2011 they control our government as well. So our elected officials, our legislature as well. Greg, and then Katie.
Yeah, later on in the agenda is a piece, I just put it in the chat, that speaks, Todd, to I think what you're driving at, and that Cole lifted up in terms of the importance, but yet at the same time the frustration at a local level, even at a state level, even at a national level, of focusing on sort of one problem at a time, whether it's environmental or anything, one issue at a time, one food product at a time, one healthcare at a time, even one bad apple company at a time, because we don't have enough time to deal with that if the governing rules make it impossible to change those rules that allow us to have an authentic democracy that can fundamentally protect the health, safety, and welfare of ourselves and our families and our communities, and of course what's left of the natural world. So we tried to put that together, and it's taken some time to try to find the right balance between respecting the important work, the work that's being done with integrity, and in many cases with great courage, because people now who are trying to resist one, poisoned landfill or something, because of these revised state laws now, they're criminalizing regular public protests. So it takes a lot of courage to deal with that sort of responding, reacting, and resisting at these individual problems. But you got to deal with, metaphorically, the arsonists and the rules that govern the legality of setting homes on fire, the legality of doing these individual problems. And that requires doing what Move to Amend is calling for, the We the People amendment. But it even goes, I mean, there's other fundamental sort of governing rules that are stacked against us, gerrymandering and some other things. So that piece that we put together tries to find that balance to say, hey, thank you for doing that work, but it's tiring because many of us have done that one at a time work, but we're forever and ever and ever and ever be doing that, responding, reacting, resisting. And if we're just constantly forever playing defense, we'll never go on offense. If we're constantly protesting and reacting, we'll never proact. And so it's time to proact. And that's what we're trying to do. And inviting other people not to give up that work, but to say it needs to be contextualized, saying, hey, the reason I'm doing this is because at the moment we can't change the governing rules. So some of our time and some of your time needs to be spent on changing and defining and making sure that we have the right to decide. Because right now we don't.
Absolutely. Well said. Go ahead, Katie.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Greg. I'm just kidding. I love it. It's kind of hard coming after Greg, but I just wanted, I know you had brought up the hurricanes, and I'm in Pensacola, Florida. And yeah, this last one was so intense. I've gone through a lot of hurricanes, and we would get one or two little tornadoes. This one had 19 tornadoes down on the ground at once. And just a few years back is when the tornadoes started hitting us. I've had to replace a roof 2 times in a year. My son's apartment complex, his was the only one standing after tornadoes just ripped up around them. So anybody in Florida who does not recognize climate change is an idiot. If you go this summer just swimming in the Gulf, I've always been a surfer and love the beach. It was so hot just to get in the Gulf. It felt like getting in a hot bathtub. So the signs are here. They're all around us.
Yeah, and all I have to say about that is that if you're in Florida and you don't believe in climate change, I can almost forgive that. But if you're in Florida and you're a state representative, or you're a member of the House of Representatives and you vote against FEMA funding, that I can.
I saw a funny meme. It said,
Yeah.
well, obviously not being able to say climate change has not helped us at all in our legislation. I mean, we were not allowed to, they were not allowed to say it in the Florida legislature for a long time. Didn't work. They're still here. It's still here.
For the past 20 years, that was the case in the Congress too. I used to work in emergency planning, amongst other things, nuclear power plants, and that's an area where I think the U.S. government does a pretty good job. And I won't go on there, but I could. State people were coming to Congress to try to get money for infrastructure improvements for emergency planning for natural disasters. And they learned about 20 years ago that if they came in and talked about climate change, they threw them out of the room. So they had to find another, like secret words that they could talk about. And the problem that they were facing was that all of the past preparations, like the Tennessee Valley Authority, had been infrastructure to fight against flooding from rivers rising. And that's not what's happening with climate change. And it's more and more, it's the warmer temperatures in the atmosphere allow a lot more moisture in the air, so the rain is the problem. The water is coming from above. Well, that means the flooding is affecting areas that were never dealt with as far as infrastructure goes. And TVA didn't deal with that kind of stuff. But we're at least 20 years behind because of the obstructionism in Congress.
Yeah.
And, that's a whole political history kind of lesson on its own. But
yeah,
just a thought.
To kind of tie all this up so we can move ahead, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but it's not hard to see who our elected officials work for. And, as I said earlier, it's not the people who are affected by the climate crisis. It's those that are largely causing and exacerbating it. So anyway, we talked about move to amend and how what we're all going to do about all this. With that in mind, I'll move into some updates we have. We are now at 88 congressional, 88 co-sponsors in the House, including Jayapal, our lead sponsor. We are working to get that introduced early in the session. This coming January, we'll have events coming up related to that, related to the inauguration. We are reaching out to presidential candidates to get their support with the pledge to amend. Not necessarily expecting answers back from all of them. I don't know how quickly Trump will get back to us, but we're sending it to everybody. And, you know, it goes to what we were kind of just saying of how, you know, what we can do as individuals, as active members of society, we can, you know, start demanding that this kind of thing is talked about in elections, that you know, corporate money, corporate personhood, corporate power is talked about in elections. Right now, you know, the narrative, as Todd was saying about, and Katie was saying about even just talking about climate change, nobody wants to talk about corporate personhood right now. Nobody wants to talk about Citizens United, and you know, this is really the stuff that we need to be talking about, as I'm sure you all know by attending this meeting. But yeah, there's an agenda item here that's just a call to action and strategy. We want to hear from you guys if you have any thoughts on what we could be doing. We're always available for that. We also want to know about any opportunities that are coming up, any actions that they have. If anybody knows of something that you think Move to Amend would be interested in, or just could use a little solidarity towards, you know, please feel free to put that in the chat, or I'll open it up in a little bit if anyone has something they want to raise up. Before I do, though, I do want to talk, Alfonso and Fernanda, about a exciting collaborative art project we have coming up that we're going to be doing here in the EcoNet space. It's called the Singing Tree. Fernanda, do you want to just give a little rundown of that?
Okay. Hey, everybody. What do I say about the Singing Tree? Well, it's an invitation for the whole world to do a painting together. And so I facilitated one for the Alliance for Just Money. And we have a video about how that went. And our final, we should pull it up on this. I have it on my other computer. Or I'll log in and show you guys. But basically, we're going to have some sessions to facilitate talking about the connections between all that Move to Amend does and EcoNet, and how we can represent that in an artistic way to just make it more visual and go to people's hearts, because that's what art does, is really make things visible and represent our problem and our ideals and our vision in a way that yeah, that works for us to use, maybe even in a march further on, and maybe make like a new Peter Coyote video with a cool narration about how it connects. So there's lots of potential in how we represent that. It's called the Singing Tree Project here, and there's been several made. It's a whole, I'll just, the links are not working. Teach me how to use your computer. It's a Mac. I don't know how to use it.
It's gonna be in the chat now.
Yeah. So there
Yeah.
you can find the one that we made with AFJM, and yeah, like I said, there's been like hundreds. We're at 140 something. This group that does this facilitation method, and it's The most recent one, really cool, was done with a camp of refugees in Uganda. So there's like so much potential for this methodology. And I just hope that it, helps us all liberate a piece of our soul that's kind of stuck with all of these problems. So I hope to guide us through that. That's going to be starting in December. Yep, you guys will tell me when, and I'll do the facilitation along with Katie, our fellow artist in-house. And it'll be fun. So yeah, stay tuned. And I'm never stopping doing art right now. I'm just crocheting some old plastic stuff. Yeah. All right. Next up. Thanks, Cole, for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you, Fernanda. Yeah, we are very excited for that. It's gonna be fun. We're gonna do it over Zoom. And yeah, I think it's just a good space to kind of get out of our gourd for a second and really think about this stuff in an artistic way. I know I appreciate the opportunity to do so because I feel like connecting to my artistic side is something that's unfortunately kind of fallen by the wayside in lieu of other things. So I'm excited for that, and stay tuned for that moving forward. Yeah, I agree, Tim. But anyway, so yeah, before we move on to the next agenda item, is there anything I want to open up? Is there anything that you know of going on? Down here we have there's a link to submit public comment urging the US and the EU to end trade attacks on climate policies. Greg, do you know more about that? I kind of looked over it briefly, but
What is
you
it?
can explain better than I can. It's to submit public comments urging the US and EU to end trade attacks on climate policies.
I don't know anything about it. Katie or Jenny must have found something and maybe was going to comment on that. So I am not aware.
Yeah, it's definitely Jenny. She's we'll take a look at that. And if you have any questions, I'm sure Jenny would be able to answer them better than I would. But if anybody has anything that they would like to raise up, I'd like to open that up now. If you want to share anything or have anything that you think we should be aware of, and please feel free to just reach out in general. It doesn't have to be right now. But as I said earlier, this is, I think, a great space for just connecting a lot of different, seemingly separate, but unfortunately very connected issues as it relates to the environment. So, all right, well, we'll just kind of move on right ahead. Greg, do you want to talk about the call for democratizing environmental organizing?
Well, I sort of babbled about that earlier. I don't know if people, have any comments or questions about it. Other than it is available now, feel free to share it, use it, read it, comment on it. It's like everything we do. Nothing is ever sort of set in stone, a la some sort of 10 Commandments like that comes down from a mountaintop somewhere, but can be revised as needed. So feel free to go at it. And, it's working, it's living, it's meant to be used, but it's meant to help people think and hopefully rethink how, in part, we do, they do, you do organizing. That actually is transferable, not just to environmental, but the principles, cut across all sorts of issues that we deal with, sort of one at a time in a very responsive and reactive way. That again is important to do, but never helps us get to the heart.
Yeah, and again, that's why we're all here. And before we wrap up, there's also a link here for just a news article about the kind of the effort to enshrine the rights of nature there's a real cool thing. When I first started at Move to Men, there's a real cool movement some of you might have heard of around the Great Lakes and giving the Great Lakes rights as individuals. And it's like, hey, if we give corporations rights as individuals, you know, why not ecological landmarks? That the if I'm remembering correctly, the people that initially, I can't remember if it was a suit or not, but the people that initially brought it, they were successful, and it was passed into law. And then the corporate lawyers went to work overnight, and almost within a day, it was challenged. But that effort is ongoing. This article has more information about it. I encourage you all to check that out and to check out that idea, movement, whatever you want to call it, and support it if you can. At this point, I want to thank everybody for bearing with me. My thoughts can get a little jumbled sometimes when I'm talking about something I'm passionate about. So I appreciate you all sitting through my somewhat disorganized presentation on Atlanta and the stuff that's going on here. I encourage you all to continue using the Ecology Network as the fabulous tool that it is to connect all of us like-minded individuals on these issues as they relate to the environment. Are there any last thoughts or last things that anybody would like to raise up or that we can put in the agenda before we're here? And if not, then we are done for the evening. Again, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for doing the work that you do. I very much appreciate this space, and as I said before, and unfortunately, is probably only going to become more and more necessary as these problems continue. And you know, hopefully they don't. But in the meantime, I look forward to seeing you all here, and look forward to our next call, which is, Alfonso, is that date right? Our speaker that was supposed to be for today, that unfortunately could not make it. She will be joining us next month, November 14th. Our speaker again is going to be Karen Coulter, talking about the Blue Mountains Biodiversity Project. So I'm looking
Actually
forward
going
to
to
that.
be, yeah, I mean, that's the group she works for, but she's really going to be talking about her book that she wrote, it's been out a little bit, dealing with the equal rights versus the rights of property. There's always been sort of a tension in our society from day one between those two sets of rights. And so she's spent a lot of time being an environmental activist, dealing with trying to protect equal rights for people, but also natural rights versus the rights of property that is not only land, but actually not, but basically the right to make money and to maximize the making of money. So that's certainly what she's going to be talking about.
Awesome. Well, definitely looking forward to that. And if there's nothing else, then I thank you all for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening, afternoon, wherever you are. Stay safe out there. Stay safe, Katie.
It was good seeing you all.